Thank you very much, Stephen. Yes, because of the illness, unfortunately, I haven't massively been able to practice the presentation either, so we're going to have a bit of an off-the-hook sort of go at this. I do apologise about the coldness. It's just helping keep me a bit cooler as I stand up here. I was asked to do about Excel, which is potentially quite a dry subject, but always really important to us. So I'm going to do my best to keep it a little bit interesting as well. And I thought the best thing to do first, I should give a little introduction about myself, and you might be wondering, well, why is Elliot giving a talk about Excel? What do you know about it? And all that. So just a little bit of background about myself. I went to Hull University, where this is probably the best shot of Hull, by the way, if you've ever been there. About as pretty as it gets. Anyway, no, I studied computer science there, which was a fantastic course and actually a really great university. Didn't do any sort of accounting or anything. I studied computer science, so kind of all how computers work and programming and stuff. And I kind of went there and I was thinking to myself, well, computer science is obviously going to be exactly like this. And it's going to be really cool and exciting, and beautiful women will fall in love with me and want to marry me. If you haven't seen The Imitation Game, by the way, probably the joke doesn't make any sense to you, but do laugh anyway. Anyway, it turned out computer science was a bit more like this. Really, much to my demise. Anyway, we learned about all this rubbish, which is all about programming and getting a computer to do what you want it to. Which when we talk about Excel, actually, the most important thing is that a computer does what you tell it to, and it does only what you tell it to. So it's all just about thinking, like in that sort of sense of instructions. Typically, humans are very bad at instructions. You use a lot of words you don't need to use, and we're not very logical in how we speak. But this sort of stuff is all pure logic, and that's really kind of my way into Excel. Because when I came here, I continued my mission after being a computer scientist, thinking, I'm probably not boring enough yet. I'll become an accountant as well. So I got to finance, representing finance here. I was really an expert in programming, not so much an expert in Excel. So I had to go through a learning process as well. But because I could think in that sort of way, think about how the computer thinks, I picked up Excel pretty fast. I mean, I used it maybe in one module during my 3 years at Hull. But then I kind of learned from there, and it's been a good environment here to learn all about Excel. So, what am I talking about when I say think like the computer? And this is the chance for me to shoehorn in my favourite computing joke, because there are lots of those, don't worry. So it goes along the lines of somebody asking their husband to go and get some loaves of bread. If they have eggs by 6, and the man says, okay. 20 minutes later, gets back with his 6 loaves of bread. And they're, oh my God, why did you do that? Well, they had eggs. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about. Like, so we use a lot of rubbish words that don't really mean anything, and a computer would interpret it in the way this programmer did. So we can break that down. And this is actually really quite a hard skill I found while I was doing my degree, is to break down what you're trying to tell a computer to do into what you're actually telling the computer to do. So we break down all these words into just some basic statements. We've got conditions, we've got results, okay? And you also end up with quite an angry wife. Trust me, don't try this at home to prove your point. It doesn't go down very well, mostly through the wasting of money. So I think while we go through the talk, it's quite important to keep this sort of thing in mind. There's a saying out there that's a bit misguided, which is computers are only as smart as the people using them. Which isn't really true. Computers are really only as smart as the person who programmed them. And when we're in Excel, that's what we are doing. We're putting in a bunch of sequences and instructions on how to do things. So the smarter we can be about that, the better our spreadsheets and information analysis can be. So just bring it back to the beginning with a confused Bill Gates looking man there. And I spoke to people about this talk before it started, and thinking, oh God, how am I going to make Excel interesting for an hour? And we thought we'd tell a story through a transaction report, because a transaction report for Oracle is probably most people are familiar with. I didn't use them that much, but they're vast amount of data, there's lots of stuff in them. Even if you don't use transaction reports, you might use project reports, or something very similar. So I thought I'd use a fictional character, Dave. This is Dave, who's going to do some Excel analysis. Now, Dave's not brilliant at Excel at the moment, and there's a few things he needs to learn. So we've got kind of the basic rules of Excel, which I'm hoping to kind of run through today. we've got all the good things to do. It used to be in Excel that it couldn't deal with that much data, in the old versions, kind of pre-2003. People did a lot of linking to other workbooks because the Excel couldn't actually deal with that much data in one workbook, but that's kind of not really true anymore. A number of people I see linking their workbooks and things like that. You're always better just to copy all the data into one workbook and work up there into different tabs. I know some people have got huge spreadsheets that they use full of formulas and quite often say to me, oh Elliot, my spreadsheet's really, really slow and is there anything we can do to improve it? It's like, well, remove formulas not worth using anymore. They'll keep kind of 10,000 rows of a VLOOKUP, which has already done its job. So if it's done, then remove it. And consistent and simple layouts is really important in finance, especially people that are dealing with large amounts of data. In every workbook I keep a consistent layout if it's my own working, so I'll use specific color tabs for different things and things like that. And it really helps you just get to grips with what's going on. I think the worst offense I've seen of this is somebody had a workbook with something like 98 tabs in it and couldn't figure out why they didn't understand the model anymore. Well, you've got 98 tabs, 60 of which you're not using anymore. So there's something about just keeping it nice and simple. Over-formatting is quite common. You tend to use really bright colours, which actually is just quite a bit offensive on your eyes and doesn't make the data very easy to read. So I thought just to highlight the worst one is this linking to other workbooks, which is really one of my pet hates. So if you're someone who does this a lot, it's about the #1 way of breaking your worksheet, because it's hugely resource intensive for the computer to deal with. As soon as you send your spreadsheet to someone else, it's going to break. Really isn't best practice. So instead, just copy all that. If it's in another workbook, just copy it all into a new tab on that workbook and do whatever it is you need to look up there. But it's a lot worth bringing out on its own, because the number of times I see this, and if your workbook's slow, it's going to be because of this. If you're losing data, if your stuff gets corrupted, it's nearly always because somebody's done a linked worksheet. Which you can find by these little brackets here, just mean that somebody's linked it to another workbook. And really isn't best practice anymore. And this is the example of kind of some of the things I see. So I also have a pet hate about pivot tables. People are really big fans of pivot tables in this department, which are great for ad hoc analysis. If you just really need to quickly do something, a pivot table can be really useful. What you tend to find if you're doing, well, I see quite a lot, people are building reports month on month. They're doing a month's analysis, then they want to add the next month's, or a year's analysis, add the next year. The pivot table really makes that quite difficult to do. It also makes the data really hard to get out. And you see in this one where the months are in alphabetical order, not in chronological order. To get the data in and out of pivot tables is really hard. So pivot tables, I would say, good, but they are overused slightly. But yeah, for ad hoc analysis, do keep using them. They are really good for that. But any sort of analysis you're going to do again and again, there are better ways to kind of lay this out. And then we see this sort of people will do kind of random highlighting of things they think are important that month. And they'll do kind of unformatted, non-consistent summaries and things like that. So that's kind of Dave's terrible transaction report that he did last month. And now Dave's going to try and do a little bit better in the next month. But there's a few things. And when I was talking to people about this, there was a debate about whether or not I should be really theoretical or really practical in this presentation. And we thought, well, I better be really practical, really. But there is one thing that, if you'll bear with me, I do want to run through, because it's as important as the kind of thinking logically about your problem, which is the components of a function. Okay, now this is going to get really, it's going to sound much more technical than it is, but trust me, it's not that bad. So a function is basically your formula in Excel. So if you're doing equals sum, equals count, that sort of thing, that's a function. Okay, so there are instructions to do something. They're made up of what we would call in computer science terms arguments, criteria, and arrays, and I will go on to explain those points. And they can be built into each other. This is a really important point as well. I've seen quite a few people actually do what we would call a nested if. So that means just building an if statement inside an if statement and so on. And you can do that with all functions in the same basis that the computer's doing what you tell it to. So if you keep building them in, they'll keep translating those formulas into results. And in the same way that normal maths works, Excel will evaluate these things inside bracket first. So this is what I mean by a function, the nice old-fashioned if statement. And this bit is what we're talking about, is the argument. That's what we mean. I mean, it's a computing term. I'm not really sure why it would be called an argument, but that's what we would refer to it as. And quite often when people ask me to come and help with their worksheets, I'll say, okay, so what are the rules? What are we looking for? How do we get the computer to understand what we mean? And quite often we have to build an argument for it. So I have to say, I want all suppliers that equal del. Okay, so our argument is supplier equals del. And that's what we would mean by it. And then you would evaluate that argument, and it will either return as true or false, or as a number, or as a summary, or something like that. And then just a bit about the combining the functions. So where we've got our argument, which is going to result as false, we can then build in another function to do something else. Now that could be an if statement, it could be anything. But you can really start to build them up in that way. I think as soon as you realise that you're just telling it to do something, you're building some argument, which could be anything, and then you're going to start building in more and more instructions, and the computer will just do what it's told, really. The most important thing is being able to think in how it's thinking, so we're not putting if there's a list of suppliers and one of them equals del and do something, you've got to do, here's a list of suppliers and equals del. So it's really got to be quite a logical way of thinking, really. So that was the dull, boring bit, which we had to go through, and we're going to go into doing some live analysis here, once I manage to escape that. So, what I have in a true Blue Peter way, and if you have any kind of pressing questions that you think are good to address as we're going through, do yell out at me. As I try to load my Blue Peter example. Yeah. Okay, so I've pre-set up a kind of a transaction analysis report, and I've got in here just a lookup that I tend to just have. I have a lot of different workbooks that I use, which is just from natural account to what is the INE mid-level reports. If you ever look at those, I've got mid-level category. I've got a tab where I'm just going to be pasting data into, one for my INE analysis that I'm going to do on my transaction report. Okay, so out of Oracle, Dave has run, well, I'm trying to say Dave for the me, gives it a bit more interesting. Dave has run just a normal everyday transaction report as it comes out, really. So we've got a few issues with this sort of report, especially the GL period is a big thing where if you look at it, it's not recognized it as dates or anything, it's just put it in alphabetical order. The same as a pivot table would do, it's just in alphabetical ways. And there's a few kind of other things. So instead of doing any manipulation, the best practice is always just to take out that data and put it into the workbook where you're actually going to manipulate it. So first keyboard shortcut of the day is Control-A, which hopefully most people will know. I'm going to try and do a few keyboard shortcuts as we go through. And then to copy, I'm going to just copy that out.
Sorry, Elliot, what does Control-A do?
So Control-A is to select all data or data in the current block that you're in. Okay? So it's a bit of a faster way. So there's always multiple ways to do things. You can use this little thing and select everything. It depends on what kind of, some people love a keyboard shortcut, some people are much happier with the mouse. Kind of depends on what kind of person you are. I'm a big fan of keyboard shortcuts. Yeah, I mean, you can do that in the same way. And then we're going to just copy that data out. So Control-C, and then into my raw data, just as it is, just going to paste that in there. Okay, then I can move on with my analysis. So a really good trick when you're using stuff out of EIS reports is to deal with these formats. So we can see this little box here telling us what kind of format this is in. This is all in text. Our account numbers, they're all in text as well. So I could instead turn it into what it's supposed to be. So I'm just going to highlight the whole column and move over to data here. Now the text to columns function, some people might be responsible. Normally that's for if you're importing some sort of file into Excel, you can use that with a bunch of rules. What we're going to do instead is actually use it as formatting. So I'm just going to click on text columns. I'm not going to change any of the settings, just going to leave them all exactly as they are, just next, finish. And what I find then, if I turn on filter, which always helps. Oh, Okay, I've now got it as dates. So it's much faster. I mean, there's other ways that people get around this. They kind of do an equals date and format it and stuff like that, which takes a bit longer and to add columns and all sorts of complicated things. But in this way, just text columns really fast. You don't have to change any settings, just press next, finish. So I'm going to do the same thing with the account numbers, because those are numbers and they're being read as text at the moment. So I'm going to do just the exact same process over to the data tab. Press next, finish. And on this one, we do then have to just set it to number. I'm just going to hide those zeros there. So hopefully people do know. So there's a little setting here. You can show decimal points or hide the little functions. Normally you just want to hide them really. And they sort of work. So now I can move on. Instead of using a pivot table, I'm going to make an actual INE statement. I do say most people are familiar. I'm not actually too familiar with transaction reports, so I'm presuming that one of the good, useful things to do is to turn this transaction report into an INE statement to see kind of what expenses we're incurring on what categories within finance. So this is all finance in this report. So I'm going to start using a few formulas. So I'm going to go all the way to the last column, which seems to be this one, the first blank column. And I'm going to use just an if report. An if function, sorry. Give it some sort of heading, it can be kind of anything you want. So the if function is one of the most useful things you'll use. People are probably quite familiar with it, but you can do a few funky things. So something equals if. And this starts actually being quite useful for when you start learning formulas in Excel. Like people assume that I know every formula Excel has. I really don't. I kind of guess what the formula might be, type it in, and then it's going to tell me how to use it. And really usefully, they kind of use really ambiguous terms that you probably just got no idea what it's on about. But if isn't too bad, we can kind of get this. We do some sort of test, what I would call an argument, if you remember it from those slides. I don't. So anything. I mean, the other day I was thinking, oh, I wonder if there's any other functions I can find, and I just started typing in random letters to see what they came up with. And you can basically just start to learn about them. I mean, whatever that does, it will tell you how to use it. So you don't need to necessarily remember everything about a formula. It will tell you what to do. So I need to give it some sort of logical test. So what I want to do first in this report is remove anything that's to do with the balance sheet, because the transaction report at the moment is including a bunch of balance sheet codes, which I'm not really interested in. I'm just trying to look at the INE. So I can do a nice statement. So the logical test is I go all the way over back to my account number column I. If that number, now we happen to know this, is that anything less than natural account 40110 has got to be balance sheet. Kind of just know that. But I mean, this is just for the case. So I can do, if that natural account number is less than that, which is the first natural account of the INE, then it's got to be the balance sheet. So I'm just going to put in the letter B. So those quotation marks, if you're doing an if statement, you wanted to insert just a word or a letter, you have to include the quotation marks around it. So in that same way, if it's bigger than 40110, then it's got to be an INE statement, an INE account. Okay, and that will just resolve to letter B there. Then the most useful trick really is in this box where you typed it. There's a little black box right in the right-hand corner there, and when you hover over it, you get this kind of solid black plus. If you double-click that, it will copy the formula all the way down. On the proviso that the column to the left of it has values in. It will only copy down for as long. So if there was a blank row here, statement would have only copied down 22 rows or whatever. But because I know that this has always got a value in it, it will copy all the way down. So then I can start taking out all those things I'm not interested in. I have to reapply the filters there just to get it to work. I'm going to select all the lines that are B, because I'm not interested in those. I'm going to select the first row. This is where keyboard shortcuts come up again. So I see a lot of people kind of doing this, and then they sit there and they kind of sit like this 10 minutes going through it, which is, I tell you, if I'm sat next to you while you're doing it, I am thinking, oh my god, okay? But I won't say it out loud. So there is a keyboard shortcut for that, which is, if I can look at it on this keyboard. Where it is gone. Oh, there it is. So if you do the key N and an arrow, it will not. Well, I'll just do it on the column. So if I press N and an arrow, it goes all the way down to the last row with a value in it. Okay, now you can do that either way. So if I do end and you just press it once and then let go and then left, it just takes me to the last value, which is not massively useful until you combine that with the shift key. So if I hold the shift key down, then press end and the down arrow, it's going to take me all the way to the end of the worksheet, which is not massively useful. That's because I'm in a blank column. Right, sorry. Do that and then end and down. Okay, which is much faster than that scrolling down, which can take forever. I mean, this is only, what is it, almost 7,000 rows, but some people are doing this on 40,000, and they just scroll all the way down for 10 minutes. So that's really useful. So yes, that's just shift, end, and down. There will be a sheet, by the way, coming out with all these shortcuts on it, so you don't have to remember them all right now. Just because, as I've been a bit ill, I haven't had a chance to write the cheat sheet, unfortunately. Okay, so that's got rid of all those things that I didn't need in there. So now I'm just left with all the I and E accounts. And that's where it becomes important that this formula is done what it needs to do now, and a lot of people I see just leave that in for absolutely no reason. So just use clear contents, and I'll just get rid of it there. Speed my work back up. So the next thing I need to do, if I look on my sheet as I pretend that I've memorized this, I'm going to clear this. So what I need to do is, at the moment in this, the transaction report has given me, here we go. They give me the account description, which is the account description at a very detailed level. I was saying I was going to do a mid-level I&E, so I don't really want this level of detail. I want to use my own lookup here and use these mid-level headings instead. So I am going to use, sorry, go back to data, a function that I'm a big fan of. And again, it caused quite a lot of debate when I was thinking about this talk. Is that a lot of people use the VLOOKUP statement. They really use the VLOOKUP. It gives me, there's two reasons I want to talk about it. One is I get to use my favorite computing phrase, which is computational expense, which is just a really fancy way of saying that it's really difficult for the computer to do. I have two favorite computing phrases, and computational expense is the other, is number one. Sorry. And a VLOOKUP is really computationally expensive, which just means that it takes forever for the computer to figure it out. Okay, so I'm going to just title that. But there was a bit, like VLOOKUP people know and they do use. So the kind of, should I show the other formula or not? And so I probably should, because people in the finance department are idiots. So it's a really good idea just to show really better ways of working. So the function I'm going to use is what's called an index match. I don't know if anybody's used an index match before. It basically does what the VLOOKUP does, only it doesn't have the weaknesses VLOOKUP has, and it is much faster than a VLOOKUP is. So if you're doing this to 100,000 rows or whatever, you're going to be much better off using the index match. So what I mean by that is I'm going to use two functions within one. So the first one is the index. Now the index function is just a function saying in an array, so a range of rows, a whole column normally. I mean, you nearly always do just doing a whole column. Bring me back. Now this is where I'm telling you what it's doing. Bring me back something on a specific row number. Okay. So in this case, I want a value from column C on my lookup. Okay. Now to find which row the value I want is on, I'm going to then use the match statement. So where in your VLOOKUP you would give it a value and bring it back from the number column in this range. Instead, I'm going to use the match statement. So the match statement then says, okay, well, give me a value to use. So I'm going to give it the wherever i's gone, the natural account, and then which column to look that up in. Okay. Now this is where match has the advantage over VLOOKUP, because with VLOOKUP you have to have an ordered table, everything has to be in a thing, and if it doesn't find it, it'll give you the next best thing, which actually quite often is a problem, because if it can't find it, I want to know it hasn't found it, rather than just making its own mind up. And this is where I just use what is called zero basing the match. So you just pick the 0, which just means that it needs to find, it tells you the option, so it just needs to find an exact match. So if it can't find a natural account, it should give me an error code, which will be actually quite useful to know that I haven't got that. Okay, so just then brings that back, support staff, and I know that it's going to be right because I know it's only going to find the exact match, and it's going to calculate a lot faster than VLOOKUP would. So there we go, I'm ruining everyone's life, telling them not to use pivot tables, and the VLOOKUP is not that good. So try not to lynch me afterwards. Anyway, so yeah, again, I can just use that little drop-down box just to fill that all the way down, and I've got my mid-level headings there. So the next thing I need to do is I'll have a double check. If there's any errors, they will be listed at the bottom of the filter, but there's not, so I know that my lookup's got everything.
Elliot,
Yeah.
is there any way I can see that string up there? First time I used it, I may have forgotten what you told me. Is there anywhere that I can find out a bit of background to that string?
Yeah, so I mean the Excel cheat sheet, which I definitely managed to prepare in time, we'll talk about some of these functions, the other ones. But always Google is your friend. People seem to think that the problem they're trying to solve in Excel is probably the first time anybody's tried to solve that problem in Excel, which is never true. Somebody has always tried to do the same thing. Now, you're not going to find the answer in Google if your attempt to Google it is, I'm trying to find a natural account that matches up to a mid-level thing, could you please tell me the answer? It's not going to go that well for you. But if you're thinking like a computer and you're saying, right, and just Google Excel 2010 index function, or match function, then you're going to find the answer. Or if you really can't remember that Elliot said index match, if you just say, just try and Google it in a very sensible way, it will find you the answer. So I find myself Googling stuff almost every day, to try and find the answer. Nobody can possibly remember all these functions all the time, and I try and keep a book about useful ones that I use. And if you're in a workbook and you think, I'm going to use that all the time, but I want to clear that function and just and not keep it active. There is a really good trick in Excel that if you just put a little apostrophe, that stops all automatic formatting, and it stops it from computing the function as well. So then I think, well, I'm never going to remember that function. You can just put a little apostrophe in, and it will just kind of keep it as a string, and then got the months covered so far, so I'm going up to April here. I'm going to remove my header. I don't need my header anymore. Then what I can use is a nice trick of transpose. People use transpose before. So what I'm going to do is so I've pressed copy, so I'm going to copy those back into here, and then for transpose you have to go into paste special. And what that means is basically going to turn it from a column into, you're not trying to paste across itself. So you press copy, into a blank row, press transpose, and just turn it into just change its direction. So we turn vertical into horizontal, or horizontal into vertical. Sorry, you see, this is where having lots of time for practice would have helped, and this would have been a lot smoother. Sorry, I just want to move this along one column. Okay, so this is all going to be my income, all the way down to my income total. Now you have to forgive me, this isn't a very sensible thing to be doing with a transaction report. It's more to show the purpose rather than saying that this is exactly how you should analyze your transaction reports. So then I've got my expenses. Okay, so I'm just doing a nice irony layout there. So this is where kind of layout and keeping it simple kind of comes into play. Okay, and then, don't know if everyone knows, if you have kind of text that's going longer than the column is, I'm hoping that maybe if you kind of hover over there and you come up with that arrow symbol there, just double click, it just resizes the column to the longest length it needs. Okay. Right, then the next move is to use the SUMIFs function, I think. Yeah. Okay, so what we have now is we have a nice layout, we need to get the data. So most people are familiar with sum. That's kind of the book 101 on Excel. And a few people might use SUMIF, which is just to say sum things up in a criteria. One of the most powerful things you can use though is the SUMIFs function, which is just really a way of saying here's a bunch of values I might want to add together, and here's a bunch of criteria, which means whether or not I do want to add them together. So I'm going to use the SUMIFs. And the first thing is, again, it's going to help me through this with its prompt. So the sum range, so what range of values do I want to add together? Now that's going to be, in our transaction report in this case, it's going to be the accounted amount column, so S. And I now have to think about what's called absolute relative or relative cell formatting, which if you're all looking very blank, what that means is, do I want the cell, I tell you, if I do a formula that looks like equals that cell plus that cell, or that cell, what I'm saying is add up whatever's one column and two columns to the left of the cell I'm in. And if you copy that around, it's always going to be that way. It's always going to be whatever cell the formula's in, it's always going to be one column to the left and two columns to the left. But what I can do is make it relative. So that's what we call relative. It's relative to the current position. Or we can make it absolute by putting in the dollar signs. And that means it's always going to add up cell C11 and cell B11, no matter where the formula actually is. So I'm going to use that in my SUMIFs. Because I know that I want this formula in every cell all the way around here, but I always want it to sum up row, column S, sorry. Here. So you can do that by using the F4 key. So the F4 will cycle through kind of relative to absolute. So there I made it absolute. It's always going to be column S that I want to add together. Now I'm saying I need a criteria range, which is just say, what's the conditions to adding these together or not. Now the first condition is going to be whether or not we're in the right month. So again, I want to make that absolute. And what's the criteria? Well, the criteria is going to be back on this sheet, and it's going to be August. Now this is where I get options on relative to absolute. So if you keep pressing F4, it cycles through a load of choices. There's 4 different choices. There's completely relative, completely absolute. There's always in row 9 and always in column C, but I want whatever values in 9, because when I copy this formula along, I'm going to want it to then pick up September, not August. But that can change like it does. So when we're doing criteria range 2, which again is just what am I evaluating this against? What's in my argument? It's going to be the mid-level categories that we put in. So again, I'm going to make that absolute. And my criteria this time is just these rows here, and I'm going to want to use the dollar sign next to the B, just to say it's always going to be whatever values in B, or whatever row we're currently in. So we'll do that. If you get those, by the way, it just means that your column's not long enough. Apparently, really isn't long enough. What's going on? It's not a good sign. Anybody see a mistake I've made? Who's out of me?
Check your format.
Sorry?
Check your format.
Yeah, that's a good point. Custom. That's general. Okay. Very good, cool. I don't know what custom it was set to. That was weird, wasn't it? Because it's a 90 out of report out of Oracle, obviously the income's going to be the long way around. So it's going to do that, and I'm going to format it actually as accounting. X-count. There. Now, if I've done my formula right, what I can do is just copy that formula and paste it along. That does look wrong, but it is actually right because that value is always going to be the same every month. We know that. But now that I've got a whole row, what I can do is select that whole row and use that fill handle and just drag it down. Rather than double clicking this time, I'm just going to drag down into all of those. And because I took that time to set up the if statement, the sum ifs, it is going to do it correctly. Then I want my income total. There's a really nifty trick that I learned from, I can't remember who showed me it now, but it's really, really useful because all the time people are wanting to do just a summary of the things in the column above. If you press Alt and the plus button, it does it automatically for you. You don't have to go and find your sum function and blah, blah, blah. Just press Alt and plus. As long as there are values in the rows above it, there do have to be some numbers there. It will do it for you, which is really useful. So we'll put that in, give it some basic formatting, and then I can just again use that fill handle just to drag it across over to there. Now, because I'm happy with my formula always working, what I can do is just select them all, paste it into the row below, and again just drag them down, and that's always going to be better. So the advantage I've got here over just the pivot table, which where you're thinking of why you just pivot it, is that I've got control over the layout now, instead of the pivot table having control. I can decide the order of these, I make sure that my dates are in chronological order, and I can manipulate the data easier than I can from the pivot table. And importantly, when we come to do next month's analysis, it's going to be easier to add the data. Okay, and I'll leave the surplus and deficit now because there's not really, with time's getting on, we don't really particularly need it. So that's quite useful. And then what we might do is do a couple of just fun and exciting formulas, which I thought would be quite useful to show, and I'm trying to find a way to shoehorn them in. So I'm going to do control information at the top. And my first one is going to be, I say, pretending I'm not looking at a sheet on the side here. Yes. So I might want to know how many transactions there are in these reports. I'll try to move that over there. So if I want to know just the volume of transactions, how many are we looking at all the way up till April 15 this year? So for doing that, I can use what's called the count function. There's two versions of the count function. Just count on its own, that will only tell you the number of numbers in a row, as it were. It doesn't add them together, it just says there's 15 numbers in this column or whatever. But if I use count A, it will just count whatever it is, if it's string values or anything. So I'm going to use the count function, go to my raw data and just say, well, how many are there in here? So I've just got to pick a column that's going to have some values in it, so I know ledger's always got to have values. Count A. Oh, it's going to be. Okay, so now I know there's almost 6,000 transactions in the year so far. I was thinking, if you're doing a lot of transaction processing, you might want to know how many of these you're having to deal with all the time. Another thing you might want to know is so these transactions obviously come from lots of different places, and they might be from invoices, they might be from whatever. So I was having a look at the source description, which I lost. Source here. Having a look at this and thinking, okay, well, what in there might you want to know? And I thought, well, project accounting, you might want to know what's been auto-posted by project accounting. So in a year so far, so how many transactions are a result of just the projects ledger? Now what we can do is use the count function again. Now with most functions in Excel, there's always the if version of it. So I've got a count if available to me. So what I can say is just in this column, there's my range. How many of those are due to project accounting? Now notice if you're using a string like a text, a bit of text like this, you do have to put the quotation marks around it. So I can do that, and if the format, I don't know what's gone on with the formatting. If the formatting was right, it would tell you the right number. So I know there's 147 project accounts. Now that could be, instead of project account, you could have done how many payroll postings are there, how many, whatever it is that you're particularly interested in. And the other really nifty one that I was going to use is how many working days it's taken to produce that many transactions. So you might be, if I was thinking, if you're sat in AP or AR, or if you're sat in payroll and you're looking at how many payroll transactions have there been through this department or whatever, you might think how many days has it taken to produce those. And I'm just going to pretend nobody's watching while I do that. Okay, so what we can do is working days. There's a function called net work days. Okay, now this can be really quite useful. And what you do is you have to give it a start date and an end date. So I can say my year started in August, and because I've formatted that from the report, it's going to pick up the date. And my so far it goes to April. And then so in Excel formulas, if it's got a little bracket around the options, it means it's optional. You don't have to have it. So I need to give it a start and end date. But I could theoretically give it holidays. Now that's a really useful function because you can give it a list of what days the office was closed on. You know, you give it Christmas and Easter and blah blah blah, and whatever you feel like the days you were off sick or whatever. And it will take those off. So net work days is going to count only the working days between that time. Okay. There's 147 working days in there, which could be really useful. I don't know, you're doing kind of a volume analysis. You can say, you know, whatever generated 6,000 transactions in 147 working days, you know, something along those lines. And the last thing I might want to do is just know date report made. You know, always good. Have that. There's a nice little function. Two ways of doing this, really. My favorite way is if you use control semicolon, it inserts today's date, which is always really like surprisingly helpful. Really good way of doing that. Or if you want to be more exact and you want to know exactly when it was you did this or whatever, there is actually a function called now, which is really literally named. So you just do now, no criteria or anything, just now in brackets, and we'll put in today's date, but also yeah, this is, anyway, it will, yeah, we'll give you today's date as a long, it's supposed to give you the time as well, but obviously my formatting here is a bit wrong. Yeah, there is a today, there's a today, so there's loads of ways of doing it, but I always just find just doing control semicolon is the fastest way of doing it. Now, that's basically having a look at transaction report. You could have done it differently. I mean, I've got a suppliers tab here where I just picked the top 10 suppliers by value, and I'm having a look at those. So in the same way you do the IME, it does the exact same thing there if that's what you're more interested in. But I mean, the real advantage of this is if I want to add next month's data, because everything's set up really quickly. Now I won't kind of do each step through, but when I come to run next, you know, May's transaction report, all I have to do is just copy it all out. Oh, actually, I've just noticed the time, so we won't go through it, but anyway, because it's all just the exact same things I've already shown you. But when you come to add next month's data, all you have to do is copy it and paste it and change that to May, and it will work.
Would you have to alter your array, your range of values as well in your formulas?
No, so because we've set this up correctly, so I was going to go through just kind of getting that data out, filtering for May, putting it back into my raw data here. I've just noticed what the time is, so there probably isn't time to go all the way through it, but if I just added, you know, May at the bottom there,
right.
It will then pick that up, and because of the way we've written the formula, just copying the whole column across will make it work, because that formula is now looking for all the right things. Which is the major advantage over pivot tables and things like that, is that as the year rolls on, I can just keep adding more and more stuff to it, really. So that's really kind of as far as I got with what could I think of in Excel that might be useful to show. There's loads of different tricks and tips and things that we can go through. And as I said, there'll be that sheet coming out afterwards, but I'd really quite like to open up to any questions people have got.
Your project accounting account, is there you can use wildcards at all? So
yes, that's a really good question. So wildcards are a way of picking up anything. The same that you would probably in Oracle. I think most people are probably familiar with wildcards in Oracle. So what I could have done, if I didn't really know what the whole, well, you know, there's lots of project accounting or project costs or whatever that I'm interested in, everything to do with projects. Instead of doing project accounting as a whole strip, what I can do is add the little star sign, and the same way that that would do in Oracle, if I add it to the beginning as well, it's going to bring me back any time that the word project appears in that column rather than project on its own.
Why not percentage?
So it's not percentage just because that's how Excel's chosen to uses wildcard value. So actually percentage of the wildcard is relatively Oracle specific. You tend to find the star sign is a far more ubiquitous use of the wildcard. But I mean, that applies. So what I could have done, in the same way that we can use star, what I could say, if I keep project accounting, this is a great question. I was going to have this on the cheat sheet actually, is I can do not equal to. So I can say bring back everything that isn't project accounting. Now, the sign for doing not is the less than and greater than signs together. It just kind of is, that's just what Excel decided to use. So I can say not project accounting, and I'll bring back all the transactions that don't have that in it. There's a weakness in my formula here because I've done the whole column, so it's also bringing me back every row that's blank. But if I'd set the right range, and so it would have worked. So yeah, so no, that's really good. So you can build them together as well. So you could do wildcards and not equal to and stuff like that. No one's got anything else while we're live in Excel here. I'm just going to swap back to the presentation if I remember what the right key is. That was the live demo part. That should say there will be an Excel cheat sheet available once I get around to doing any work and not being ill. As probably some of you will know, I am leaving the university on the 17th of July to go and work at Maudlin. But if you have Excel problems, do come and ask. A number of times I come across people that have spent half a day doing something in Excel when they could have done it like in 10 minutes. So if you find yourself sat there doing something really manually and thinking, God, there's got to be a better way of doing that, do come and find me and ask about it. But if you do, there are charges. And the charges are in biscuits. So the standard rate goes from digestives. Chocolate digestives become more important. The hobnobs, if you're going to use up half a day of my time. And as Nick has discovered, if it's any more than that, you have to go to M&S, I'm afraid. So I tell you the word with biscuits. Will accept maybe sweets instead, but that's by negotiation.
But this is all actually true.
Yeah, no, people laugh. I actually do charge you in biscuits.
Do you get anyone to make you coffee for you there, Anya?
No, don't get anyone to make a coffee, but I don't know if that's just a trust
No
issue.
one probably can make you
I trust the biscuits, it's fine, it's a good system. But anyway, yeah, so kind of that was it, really. If you've got any questions, now is the time, or a round of applause instead. So thank you.
Thank you.